Hey guys, what's happening? So continuing with more talk about the hunt for Wolverine, there's a few things from this story I want to pull out and kind of pick apart. And I mainly want to do that because certain things pop up in this story that most people may not know about, and they may or may not come back later on. But I still want to talk about them just in case they do come back later on, everybody's not confused. And also, if these things do pop up again, videos like this will help as a reference for you guys to go back to and kind of brush up on certain details so I don't have to detour way too crazy later on down the road. And hopefully me doing this will be a little bit more helpful. Just let me know down in the comments. So now, before I get into the whole Cyborg Wolverine thing, as far as within this series, we first heard this from Detective Frank McGee, who's the guy that Daredevil went to in order to help him find Wolverine. And in the last video, I didn't want to spend too much time on it, but I was pretty much saying that his eyes are like DSLRs. And some of you guys are like, what is that? But a DSLR is a digital signal lens reflex. It's a camera. So he can shine his eyes really bright in order to blind people, but he also literally has a photographic memory. So aside from shining his eyes very brightly, he can also keep all of these images in his memory in order to look back at later on. And for somebody who was already a good detective, now that he's inhuman, it just works in his favor all the better. But in this conversation between Detective Frank and Daredevil, when Daredevil mentioned that Wolverine was missing, Frank was just like, which one? And as he listed a few, he mentioned the old one, which of course was Old Man Logan, the lady, of course Laura Kinney, who at this point in Logan's absence is the current Wolverine. So I definitely can see how that's confusing. Then he mentioned the blonde kid, who we've talked about a lot, which is James Hudson Jr., who originated from the 1610 universe, but crossed over to the Marvel Prime Earth after Secret Wars. But the last one that he mentioned was the android, and I already know for a fact we haven't talked about him already. But now would be the perfect time, mainly because of his connection with the Reavers. And for this guy, it's a pretty touching story, at least in my opinion. But before we dive into that, we also got to talk about from the last video what I mentioned about Lady Deathstrike, who had formerly worked with the Reavers and also had it out for Wolverine, because way back when, for the longest time, she had wanted to kill Wolverine herself. And that more so goes into her origin around World War II, because her father was actually the Japanese scientist who figured out how to bond adamantium with human bones in an attempt to create Japanese super soldier samurais. But of course, those plans were stolen from her father, which was how Weapon X was able to implement that research into their projects. But with her father having his research stolen, this in turn was another failure for him, because he was a kamikaze pilot that survived. And because of that and his research being taken, not only did he take it out on his daughter Yuriko, but he also killed her two brothers by pretty much sending them to their death to prove their loyalty to his cause. And Yuriko and her brothers had it bad even before that. Like, they were tortured by the wife of William Stryker back when he fought in the war. But as far as when her hatred for Wolverine began, this was more so around the time when she was tracking down Bullseye after she had taken over her father's company. And because Bullseye was given adamantium enhancements, she had the technology to track him down, but instead came across Wolverine. And when she came across Wolverine, she literally wanted to rip the adamantium off of his bones and take it back. And so now in Wolverine Volume 2, issue number 37 or 38, I want to say it's 37 going into 38. But it was around this time that Lady Deathstrike was also associated with the Reavers, and during that time, in a mix-up with who she had thought to be Wolverine, but it wasn't. As it turned out, it was an android built by Donald Pierce that was designed for a more elaborate plan in order to lead Wolverine into a trap. And Yuriko at the time saw it as a form of disrespect, because she felt like Donald was making this robot to do what he felt like she couldn't. And that kind of was what the plan was, but there's a bit more to it than that, because Donald's main plan with this Cyborg Wolverine, which really wasn't a cyborg, it's more of an android because it's not like human, like at all. But Donald's main plan was to use this cyborg to lure in Wolverine so he would get close to Ellie, and the android Ellie that was designed to look like an innocent little girl was actually a bomb. But from what I mentioned earlier about this story about this Wolverine being extra touchy, is that after a while, this version of Wolverine and both the android Ellie, they started to get like consciousness to themselves. Like over time, they evolved and became more self-aware. And that was mostly on Ellie's part, because when she came to the realization of what her mission was, because she was more self-aware at that point, she didn't want to die. And because she couldn't shut down herself and work on herself and defuse the bomb, she instead upgraded the android Wolverine so he could carry out the full mission without her dying. And as a byproduct, she upgraded his strength and his intelligence so that he could carry out the mission and spare her life. But on her end, what she was able to do was install a radio link between the two of them, which I guess had no shutdown required for the installation. But with doing this, she gave them a secret radio connection that allowed not only for the two of them to communicate, but also transfer data directly. And with the upgrades that she gave him, she named him Albert after Albert Einstein, but still this was a secret to the Reavers and to everyone else. And Wolverine and Albert did go toe to toe at one point. Of course, Albert didn't win, but as time progressed, Elsie could not fight her programming. And because of this, she led Wolverine into a burning building where he went in to save her. And even after he saved her, she was still trying to fight against her self-destruct protocol and prolong her life. And initially, Wolverine did think he was just saving some little girl. And when he got her out and she was safe, but she was still crying, it took a minute for both him and for Storm to realize what was really going on. But the crazy thing is what Albert ended up doing elsewhere, because he broke into like your radio store. I forget the name of it, but it was pretty much like the same place she bought the radio she put inside of him. And it's like whatever your Radio Shack would have been at the time, or nowadays whatever your computer store or your Best Buy would have been. Radio Hut, yes, Radio Hut. I guess like Radio Shack and Pizza Hut put together, whatever. Anyway, but he goes into this computer store and he hacks into the NSA supercomputer in order to use that supercomputer to hack the bomb inside of LCD. And once he got in, he radioed that information back to her, which in turn saved her from self-destructing. So Albert was a hero, man, much like your OG Logan. But the problem was you can't just go inside some radio store and hack the NSA and expect nothing to happen, because even though he saved Elsie's life, like when the police came in right after, they did damage. But he had to stay connected the whole time in order to transfer the data and save Elsie's life. But that wasn't the end for Albert, because once he was in police custody, and with him being a machine, he was stored with the evidence lockup, and while he was in there, he ended up using what spare parts and whatever pieces he could find to piece himself back together and break out. And once he got out, he reunited with Elsie, and from there, the rest is history. But hopefully that explains more why this version of Wolverine has these mechanical parts that are both advanced and kind of makeshift at the same time. But who knows, if we see him again, or the both of them, both him and Elsie, if we see them both pop up again in the hunt for Wolverine, I wouldn't be too surprised if, much like the Reavers, if he had his own upgrades as well. And not just that, but I would imagine with Elsie, with her knowledge evolving, that it would be a much better job than what the Reavers have done for themselves. But in addition to that, with Albert having better upgrades, and the relationship between Albert and Elsie, with him being super protective of her and coming back for her after he got out. Like, even if we don't see them included in the hunt for Wolverine, I wouldn't mind just getting a standalone series of just them two explaining where exactly they have been. But that'll do it for this one, guys. Just wanted to dig a little bit deeper into the hunt for Wolverine. Let me know you guys' thoughts down in the comments, and we'll do it again next time. Alright, later.